Okay. And what we're going to do today is talk about molecular spectroscopy. Share. Okay. So I already asked you to talk about molecular emission. Okay. So the difference between atomic and molecular spectroscopy, well, obviously, in terms of the element that you measure. Okay. So if we're going to look about, we could say molecular spectroscopy, it has something to do with what? The ultraviolet and visible spectral region that we use for qualitative and quantitative analysis of inorganic, organic, and biological species. Okay, so if we're going to look at this molecular spectroscopy, it involves the UV and the visible region, the IR region, and of course the what we call included supposedly here is the so-called luminescence region or emission region. So we're going to talk about today the UVBs, okay? The so-called ultraviolet visible molecular absorption spectroscopy. So when we're talking about absorption, okay, synonymous to that is what we call transmittance. So when we're talking about molecular absorption spectroscopy, so this is based on the measurement of either the transmittance or absorbance. Okay, so since I would say during your general chemistry, you were already introduced to this what we call method, spectrochemical method. So anytime that the molecules, okay, or matter interact with light, so there's a possibility that it absorbs some of the light, okay, or some of the light is what we call transmittance. So usually, what do we need here? We need a transparent sample holder or transparent what we call cells. Because if we're going to look at the transparent cells, so we have our matter here. So there's light that is what we call being focused here. And depending on how much of the light was absorbed or how much of the light is transmitted, that is absorption spectroscopy all about. So all about this absorption spectroscopy is based on the UV and the visible region. We just focus on the UV, okay? And its application for quantitative determination of large variety of what we call species. So ordinarily, everything depends on what? The Beer's law, okay? The concentration of an absorbing analyte is linearly related to the absorbance as given by the Beer's law. So if we're going to recall, we define transmittance as what? Anyone? So it's usually, we could say, P solution over P solvent, okay? Or the way we do it is P over P0. And A is just negative log P, or A is just equals to log of P solvent minus P solution, okay? Or log of P0 over P. So usually this is how we define transmittance. Okay. So if you're going to look at this P, this is your incident power and transmitted power. So it's just like the fraction of the transmitted power over the incident power. Okay, and if we're going to get the log reciprocal of that, okay, we have this so-called absorbance. So this is what we know as the Beer's law. Okay, and usually, if you recall, the relationship that they have, transmittance on this side and then absorbance on this side. So the higher the transmittance, the lower is the absorbance, or vice versa. Okay, so if we look at the Beer's law, so this is just A equals to the negative log of transmittance, or log of incident power over transmitted power, or the one that we know, I think we always call this as ABC, where this one is molar absorptivity. That is, we could say, a constant for a particular compound. This is the path length, and this is what we call concentration. Now, usually what is constant in this one, in this what we call expression, molar absorptivity, if you already know your sample, and the path length. Okay, so if we keep those two constant, we could say absorbance is just directly proportional to the concentration of the given species. Okay, I don't know if you have seen that a path length can be over what? 1 centimeter. And if it's over 1 centimeter, it has a direct effect on the absorbance. The same thing with what we call molar absorptivity. But the thing is, usually, if you try to develop a method for a particular compound, you're trying to determine this molar absorptivity. Okay, that's a constant. So once you develop them, okay, you have a constant value there. And all you need to do is get the absorbance and get the correlated concentration based on the absorbance. So those are the ones that they use in clinical tests. Okay. So usually if you have what? Urine test, blood analysis. So they have this patent for a particular dye or compound that they will react with the sample that you have. And depending on absorbance that they get, they already have a correlated value to it. So that's the story of what we're using this Beer's law. Okay. So if you're going to look at these terms, these are terms that we have based on the book. Still the same, incident radiant power, transmitted radiant power. So if you define it, radiant power in what? Radiant power transmitted, or incident intensity, transmitted intensity. Absorbance, definition of this is log of transmitted power over incident power, or in biology, they use it as what? Optical density, right? Or the extinction, as they call it now. If you have this transmittance, you have this incident power over transmitted power, or transmission as the alternative, or the path length of the sample length over the attenuation, which is 4. Okay, absorptivity, extinction coefficient, that's the other name. And if you have a molar absorptivity, that's a molar extinction coefficient. Okay, now they said transmittance and absorbance cannot normally be measured in a laboratory because the analyte solution must be held in a transparent cell container or cell. So I don't know, when you take your 137.1, did you still make an experiment that you use a chalk in Spectronic 20? Naabutan niyo yung experiment na yun? O hindi na? Those who took 137.1, an undergrad instrumental analysis lab, UPLB. Okay, because what you have there is we try to show the students that with the chalk, you're not going to get any reading, okay? Because you need a particular material to be transparent. Now, if you're going to look at the typical process that is happening, okay, in a glass cell, so we could say we have what? Reflection and scattering losses. So this is usually the sample cell, your cuvette. So reflection can occur at what? Two air wall interfaces as well as two wall solution. So this is the air wall interface, one here and then another one here. And then with the solution, this is the wall solution and then the wall solution that happens. Okay, so usually the resulting beam attenuation is substantial as we demonstrate in the about 8.5 of a beam of yellow light is lost by reflection in a passing through a glass cell containing water. Okay, and then in addition, there's also attenuation of beam that may occur as a result of scattering by large molecules and sometimes from absorption by the container walls. Now the question, how are you going to compensate them? How do you compensate these losses or this what we call effect of reflection and scattering in a solution? Anyone? What do you do? What's the first instance that you do when you do the analysis? You use what? Okay, you use a blank. And the definition of the blank is what? Anything except the sample. So if you use a blank, you use your sample, any difference there between the blank and your sample is due to the sample. Okay? So usually we could say you can observe this what we call losses, but it's well compensated by using what we call the blank. Okay? So any reading that you have there, if you subtracted it with the blank, it's just due to this what we call sample. Okay, so if you're going to look at this, what we call power of the beam transmitted by the analyte is usually compared with the power of the beam transmitted by identical cells containing only solvent. So the solvent that you have there, that's your blank. So an experimental transmittance and are obtained through this equation. So the incident, transmitted power, incident power refers to the power of radiation after it passed through the solvent and the analyte. Now, sometimes if you use a double beam, what do you have? Okay, one of them is a solvent or a blank, and the other one is your sample. But usually, even if you have a double beam, what you do is you just blank it with nothing, and then you add in the sample, what we call the blank, and then you do the reading. Okay, so that's usually you seldom have a double beam spectrometer lately in most what we call modern UV-based spectrophotometer. Okay, we have two in our lab, and most of them, I think only one has the two, the other one has only one. Okay, so we could say that we have here solution and the solvent. Okay, so the solvent, we could say that's the blank that you have. So the power that is, we could say, transmitted by the solvent, and then the power transmitted by the solution. Now, if you have the sample cell, as I have told you, there is usually an effect on the length. Nasanay lang kasi tayo na meron tayong yung typical cuvette. Okay? But in one experiment that we are doing at your college, we have an experiment wherein the length, okay, of the path length varies, not only for 1 centimeter, but sometimes longer than that. Okay. And the students are asked, what do they observe if you if you increase the length? So if you're going to look, typically this is what the cubet that we use. So what if we have like that one? So what will be the effect on this one? Okay. So just like the concentration, since you have more species that is what we call light that is being transmitted or light being absorbed, okay? So we could say it has an effect on this, what we call path length. So after passing through a certain length, okay, of the material which contain what? An additional amount of the absorbing species, so sample cells with absorbing species, okay? So this power is, we could say, decreased to P as a result of the absorption. So the light being transmitted is reduced, but as you could say, as the transmission decreases, the absorbance increases. Okay? So maraming, we could say, the more absorbing species that you have, the more absorbance that you can get, and the less light that is what we call being transmitted. So that's the relationship of the path length, okay, with respect to the absorbance. Because usually, ang inaano nga lang natin is just parang ito lang, tsaka ito. And usually, one simplest experiment to determine the molar absorptivity is what? You're going to plot concentration versus a, how do you get the molar absorptivity? Anyone? Molar absorptivity is equals to what? Ano? Kapag nag-plot kayo, usually, di ba, ganun yung relationship? So, ano ngayon yung A, or molar absorptivity? That is equals to what? Sige nga. Of course, you're using a constant path length. So, molar absorptivity now is equals to what? If you get the absorbance of different concentration of a particular sample or analyte, this is equals to what? Okay, that is equals to your slope. Usually, what do we have with the slope? The rise of the run, right? The change in y over the change in x, or the change in absorbance with respect to the change in the concentration. Now, among, I would say that the different analytical method, this is the most useful. All you need is what? A light source, a sample compartment, okay? And maybe a monochromator to what we call put a specific weight went to the light source, and then a detector, and you have an analytical method. And as I told you, this molar absorptivity, that's usually constant for a particular element. Okay? So, application pa rin yan, no? We could say Beer's law. Okay? So, if we're going to look at this, the power that we have here, the incremental power loss is usually proportional to the power in increasing power, increasing the power absorbed. Longer path length, greater numbers of molecules, incremental size, and more power that is absorbed. Therefore, the change of the power that is respect to, okay, the path length that you have. And because of that, your K there can become a proportionality constant, which is a function of maybe a wavelength or the concentration. So that's a very, we could say, what we call the one experiment that you can do, determine the molar absorptivity by just looking at this what we call absorbance with change in the concentration. So if we do some factoring on this what we call relationship that we have, okay? So we convert the fraction, remove the negative sign, and we change ln to log. This is the relationship that you get. The log of the incident power over the transmitted power equals to 1 over 2.303 K, okay? Or we could say like this one. Now, how do we apply the what we call the Beer's law in mixture? Have you tried solving, we could say, concentration of multi-component solution, a 2 or 3 component solution? Okay, so the way that you're going to do this is the absorbance that you have there for a specific wavelength is just equals to absorbance coming from sample 1, absorbance coming from sample 2, and absorbance coming from sample 3, or whatever, or however many samples do you have that you have here. So we could say the total absorbance is just equals to the sum of the absorbance of each sample that you have there. Okay, you can apply Beer's law for a medium that contains more than one kind of absorbing species. Okay. Now we will not solve problem on that one, but I think during your undergrad there is what we call a solution for a problem that is always given there. I'm not sure if that was given in the board exam, because I always have an example of that when I was teaching 137. So the way that you do it, you have to get the molar absorptivity of each species in the given region or wavelength. Okay, but the idea here is if you have a multi-component, the total absorbance there is just the sum of all the absorbance species in a given wavelength. Okay. Now, these are, we could say, the assumptions that you have when you derive this Beer's law. So the assumption that you have there, the incident radiation is monochromatic. So all molecules absorb light of one wavelength. Okay, absorbing molecules act independently of one another. That means that flow concentration. The path length is uniform. All rays travel the same distance in a sample. There's no scattering. Everything is absorption. Absorbing species medium is optically homogeneous. Incident beam is not enough to cause saturation. Okay, you will know later on the limitations of this, what we call Beer's law. Because there comes a time that when the concentration is too high, Beer's law is not linearly related. Okay, and all rays should be parallel to each other and perpendicular to the surface of the what we call medium. Now, if we're going to look at this, what we call the limitations to the Beer's law, okay? So usually there are deviations on this, what we call Beer's law. Some of them we could call what? Real deviation, fundamental, and represent real limitations of the law. Other are results of how the absorbance measurement are made, like instrumental deviations or a result of a chemical changes that occur when the concentration changes, like this one. Okay, so if you have what? Real deviations, these are fundamental. And represent real limitation. So most likely the concentration that you use is not more than 0.01 molar. Okay. You limit the concentration because if you have too much concentration, you have to take consideration the interactions that happen there. Remember, if you have a solution, there's a solute-solvent interaction, solute-solute interaction, or hydrogen bonding that can affect the analyte environment and its absorptivity. Okay. So the effect of molecular interaction, they said, is not significant if the concentration is below 0.01. Some exception occur if you have what? Large molecules. So if you have large molecules, you need to concentration to be even lower. Okay. Now, a specific example that they have here is this so-called methylene blue. Even if the concentration that you have in methylene blue is what? 10 to the 6 molar or even below that, it doesn't obey the Beer's law. Okay. So that's what we call one example of these limitations that we have. And then another thing that we can look at is what we call the limitations of the Beer's law is chemical deviation. So in the chemical deviation, this is, we could say, the interaction that happens among the species that we have there. The analyte will dissociate, associate, or react to give molecules with different absorption characteristics. Okay. So maybe the best example here is the pH dependent indicator. What can you say about the pH dependent indicators? Let's say the classic one that we have. What can you say about phenolphthalein? So if you have an indicator, what's the reaction? HIN. Okay, so you have what? One color. And then when they dissociate to H plus and IN minus, this is another color. So if you're monitoring it, let's say at low pH, what do you expect? Do you think you have any absorbance at any wavelength? Anyone? But if you make it basic, what will happen? So maybe you could say what? If this is the pH and this is what? The signal. So usually it may just be like that, right? Because at pH, lower pH, it's colorless. So you're not going to get any absorbance. But at high pH, the phenolphthalein is deprotonated. You now have the pink color. And once you have the pink color, you're not going to get a signal. I'm not sure if I have an example. Okay. So that we could say an example of a chemical deviation. Questions so far? So what do you need to do? If there are what we call compound that involve the change structure with the change in pH, what do you need to do? How are you going to solve this problem? You use what? Anyone? So if you want to make sure that the pH don't change, you need to use a buffer system. So usually this will happen at unbuffered system because the pH would change, and if there's a change in the pH, there's a change in the structure. It can be protonated or deprotonated, and usually it would give you different color in the protonated or deprotonated form. Now, the next one that we have is instrumental deviation. The Beer's law applies, it strictly applies only when measurements are made with what? Monochromatic radiation. Now, what happens if you have a polychromatic radiation? What happens when you have a stray radiation? So if we have a polychromatic radiation, this is what can happen. In the presence of polychromatic radiation, that is, there's a light of more than one wavelength, okay? You can have a reading like this one. So the absorbance that you measure there, okay, you have to take into consideration the other power transmitted and power that incident, what we call light at the different wavelength. So for instance here, what will happen to the absorbance that you have? So the molar absorptivity here is this, and then you can have what? A negative deviation, lower absorbance than predicted because of the what? Higher transmittance. So higher transmittance because your molecules don't absorb one wavelength as well as this what we call the other. So the absorber here is the indicated molar absorptivity at the two wavelengths. So if you're going, okay, to look at this, what we call flat, okay, the relationship here now of the absorbance that is measured and concentration is not already linear. Because there are other, we could say, transmitted light that is affected because of the presence of different wavelengths. Now, if you're going to look at this, there's no longer, the molar absorptivity are already different. So in addition, as the difference between the molar absorptivity increases, the deviation is what? They would linearly deviate. There's an increase in the deviation linearly. And if you keep adding additional wavelength, then there's more, we could say, effect on this one. So that's the effect of this, what we call polychromatic, we could say polychromatic radiation. And we can also look at this as the effect of this, what we call polychromatic radiation on the Beer's law given here. So in the spectrum, here on the left, the absorptivity of the analyte is nearly constant over band A. Okay, from the source. Now note, if you're going to plot this in Beer's law, okay, at the bottom, using the band A, it gives a linear relationship. And so in the spectrum, your band B corresponds to a region where the absorptivity shows substantial changes. So in the lower plot, note the dramatic deviation that you have in the presence of additional wavelength. So what you need to do, you have to select a wavelength band near the lambda max, the one that you have, where the analyte absorptivity changes little with the wavelength. Okay, so that's one of these what we call instrumental deviation. Now, the other one that we have is stray radiation. So usually radiation that exit from the monochromator, they usually what? Contaminated with small amounts of scattered or stray radiation. So this radiation, which is known as stray light, we define it as radiation from the instrument that is outside the nominal wavelength band chosen for the determination. And this usually results in scattering and reflection of the surfaces of gratings, lenses, mirrors, filters, and windows, or whatever optical components your instrument has. And the wavelength of this stray radiation often differs greatly from that of the principal radiation, and in addition, the radiation may not have passed through the samples. That's why you call it stray radiation. Okay. So if we're going to look at this, what we call stray radiation, this is usually what's happening. So if you have a linear relationship that you have there, so we could say this is what it is. But if there is power from stray radiation, so this is what happening. There's an apparent deviation from the Beer's law brought about by the various amount on stray radiation. So your absorbance begins to level up with concentration at high stray light levels. So stray light always limits the maximum absorbance that can be obtained, because when the absorbance is high, the radiant power is transmitted through the sample that you have there. Through the sample, they become comparable to or lower than the stray light. Now, what else? What could be the other possible, we could say, instrumental deviations that we have? Another one that I have not listed here, we could say is this one. Mismatch cells. So this happens when the length, okay, of your what we call sample holder is not the same. Now this error can be avoided if you use what? The same sample cell, or at least match cell. So the way that you use one, we can take you back all throughout the analysis. that's why sometimes it's not practical to use this so-called double beam spectrophotometer, because you have to make sure that the cells would match with them. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to look is slit. The effect of this, what we call slit size or slit width on the absorbance measurement. So usually you prefer your slit to be what? Narrow or wide? If you have complex samples, you want your slit to be narrow because they can resolve complex spectra. So if you're going to look here, okay, so this sample is what we call benzene vapor. We have an experiment on this in our what we call instrumental lab here. So if you're going to look at this, what we call effect of the spectral bandwidth, as it increases, the fine structure in the spectrum is lost. So if you have a slit of 10 nanometer, you have there a broad absorption band. But the narrower that it is, the more we could say fine structure that we have. So what happened here, you lost the details that of course when the slit widths are increased from small values here to large values, okay? So from 1.6 to 4 to 10, what we call nanometer, so you could see that it becomes what? Broader. And usually, if you have what? Qualitative studies, the loss of the resolution that accompanies the use of the wider slit is often important because the details of spectra are useful for identifying the species. Narrow slit widths are required to resolve complex spectra. I'm not sure if you see in the instrument that you have to change the bandwidth that is utilized. Okay. We usually use this in emission and IR. But in absorbance, usually whatever's preset there, that's the one that we utilize. Okay. Usually, the relationship that they have a decrease in the slit width by a factor of 10, okay, reduces the radiant power by a factor of 100. Because the radiant power is proportional to the square of the slit width. So there's always a trade-off between what? Resolution and signal to noise ratio. So the problem is if your resolution is, we could say, high, your signal to noise ratio is low. If your resolution is low, the signal to noise ratio can be, we could say, high. So you have to have some sort of a compromise of this what we call relationship, resolution and signal to noise ratio. So in general, it is a practice, a good practice to narrow slits no more than is necessary for resolution of the spectrum at hand. With a variable slit spectrophotometer, proper slit adjustment can be determined by acquiring the spectra at progressively narrower slits until maximum absorbance becomes constant. Now, we can look further on the effect of the slit widths here. on the bandwidth and on the peak height. So this is an example of a solution of praseodymium fluoride. So if you're going to look at this, a bandwidth of 34 angstrom, if you lower it to what we call the 0.5 slip width, you half it, and then you not put it further. So what do you observe? The narrower it is, the higher is the signal that you get. So if we're going to look at a typical UV-Vis spectrophotometer, okay, so the classic one that we have a light source, okay, and then we have wavelength selector, and then we have the sample, and then we have what? The detector, and then the readout system. So the light source that we have is either a deuterium that covers the UV region and the tungsten lamp. So D2 or deuterium lamp, that is the one that covers the UV region. Now, the tungsten lamp that's covered, the one that is the visible region. And if you're going to look at them, this is how they look like. So any UV-Vis spectrometer, they have these two light sources. So if you're going to look at the power that they have, so this is the wavelength. So as you could see, they're higher at UV region, and this one, the tungsten filament lamps, they're lower there, but higher at the visible region. And then we have discussed already about the monochromators when we discussed the optical component. Okay. And then in terms of the sample holders, so you know, cuvette glass or Q silica. So if you're going to have an experiment on this one, how does it look like? So maybe one of them would look like this, the other would look like this, and the other would look like this. So if you're asked what's A, what's B, and what's C, and the choices that we have is what? Cuvette, plastic, and glass. Oh, not cuvette, quartz. So how are you going to assign them? If I give it in a quiz, what is A? Usually this is the data that we observe. If I ask my students to get the reading of quartz cuvette, plastic cuvette, and glass cuvette. So for quartz, what letter it is? What would be the spectrum if you have a quartz cuvette? That would be, okay, A. Now for plastic, that would be C. And for glass, that's B. And in terms of what? The price, yeah, the most expensive is the quartz, followed by the glass, and then the plastic. Maybe all of you know how a cuvette looks like, or have already seen a cuvette, right? And then in terms of the detectors, either it's photodiodes or photomultipliers. That's usually the one that can be found in the UVB. So if we're going to look at the types of the instrument that we have here, It can be what? A single beam or a double beam. Sometimes we can even what we call include uh, other, we could say, types of this instrument. We can also include a multi-channel. So double beam, it can be a double beam in space or a double beam in time. So if you have a single beam, you place the cuvette with the blank, okay, in the instrument and take the reading. 100 absorbance transmittance. That's the old, we could say, spectronic 20. Everyone knows what a spectronic 20 looks like? Meron pa ba yun? Would you believe there's still spectronic 20 that we have? We have in the lab. So I just want to show you what it looks like. Sabi nga nila kahit ito lang yung meron kang instrument, buhay ka na. Antik na ba siya? Because if, when I was teaching 137.1, that's the first experiment that we have. And what do? We put here, okay, usually, meron dyan yung parang wavelength, i-adjust mo yung wavelength, pag-ano siya doon, tapos ilalagay mo either transmittance of absorbance. Tapos ang gagawin mo, once na-achieve mo yun, okay, maglalagay ka ng blank dito, tapos kung transmittant, isi-set mo siya hanggang ang reading niya ay 100%. Kung absorbance, isi-set mo siya hanggang ang reading niya is 0. And then you remove that blank, okay, and then you put the sample. So depende whether you're looking for transmittance of absorbance, it will give you the reading. We still use this. Sayang nga kasi, I think 5 years ago, our lab disposes, I think, 3 spectronic 20. Pero maganda pa siya. I think mas bago pa doon sa ginagamit namin dyan noon. So you place cuvette with sample, take reading, either percent transmittance or absorbance. So if you're going to look at how it looks like, it's like this one. At makikita mo yung ano niya, yung pathway ng source of light niya, isa lang. Hindi siya nag-split. Okay? That means they're just in the same sample compartment. Now, if you have a double beam, this is the most that is available commercially instrument. Pero ginagamit ko yan as single beam. I don't use the two, we could say, sample container. So here in the double beam, the light is split and directed towards both reference cell and the sample cell. You have two detectors, okay, that measures the ratio. So it measures and calculates the absorbance. So the advantage of this is compensates for the fluctuations in the source and in detector because you're getting the signal from the sample and the blank at the same time. Kaysa yung ano, yung sa blank muna and then sample. So what if there's a fluctuation in the source? So there's a different reading there. So in addition to the sample, there could be a difference doon sa fluctuation na nangyari. And if you are looking for a time changes, or you look at the absorbance that change with time, this is a better, we could say, design, continuous reading or recording of this what we call spectra. Now, if we're going to look at the instrumentation that we have here, so the light source that we have for a single beam, typically the least expensive that we have is a tungsten. And then you have what? Filters, glass filters as monochromators that you have there. Okay. And then your sample holder, there is what? A test tube. Hindi siya cubette, usually test tube. Okay. And if you're going to look at the detector that you have there, you can have either what? A photovoltaic cell. Now, if it is a sophisticated one, you can have an interchangeable D2W sources that you have there. And then you have a high resolution grating monochromator. And this one that you have there is a photomultiplier tube. And digitize yung readout. Okay, hindi analog. Even the one that I showed you, the Spectronic 20, is digitized already. Pag analog kasi yung ganun. And those high sophisticated one, usually nakaano na siya sa computer. Now, for a double beam, okay, it can be either what? Double beam in space or double beam in time. What could be the difference between the two? Anyone? Ano yung difference ng in time versus in space? So let's look at this one here. So ito yung double beam in space, okay? Versus dito sa double beam in time. So one of them, what? Simultaneously? Why did I say simultaneously? Because you see, look at this, what we call the light that comes here. The beam splitter splits the light at the same time. And it goes in the reference cell and the sample cell. That's why we could say the two beams that simultaneously pass through the reference and the sample cells before striking too much photodetectors. So yan yung double beam in space. So double beam in time, what do you have here? Just like in time, it happens in sequence, right? So ano yung inuuna nilang mini-measure? So if you're going to look at this one, they measure the reference cells first, parang nagsiset siya ng ano, baseline. So, once na measure yung tinatawag natin reference, it establish a baseline, tapos i-measure yung sample. So, yung absorbance ng sample, kina-calculate by comparing the intensity of light transmitted through the sample to the baseline established by the reference. So, yan yung, we could say, a difference no dalawa. Now, the question is, which is better? Anong sagot? Pwede ba ang sagot one is better than the other or it depends? Which do you think is better? Or ito na lang, sa tingin nyo, alin yung mas mura at alin yung mas mahal? Sige nga, division of the house. So, yung time ba ang mas mura? O yung in space? Okay? So, most of you saying that time yung mura. Kasi yung design ng time is, we could say, simpler compared doon sa simultaneous. This is more complex. Kumbaga sa kotse, ito yung manual, ito yung automatic. Pag nasira daw ang automatic, automatic din yung kaltas ng pera sa bulsa. Okay? And also, you could say na mahal yung photo detector, no? Dalawa. Pero pag tinanong naman, alin yung mas maganda in terms of what? Speed, precision, or we could say sensitivity, mas maganda yung mas mahal. Right? Kasi nga, sabi nga sa'yo, parang manual and automatic car yan eh. So, mas mahal to, pero mas better naman in terms of the performance itong in space. Now, in addition to this, meron din tayong tinatawag na multi-channel instrument. So here, ito na yung dumadating yung tinatawag nating PDA. Now, the thing is, it can scan the whole spectrum very quickly in a snapshot, less than 1 second. It's a powerful tool for the studies of transient intermediates, especially in what we call fast reaction. So this is a new type of spectrophotometer, and usually that's the one that is now available in the market. So you can use it for qualitative and quantitative determination of components. So ang main use dito yung tinatawag nating detector sa LC, liquid chromatography. Sometimes meron sila tinatawag na PDA, photodiode array detector. So if you're going to look at this, what we call composition of this photodiode array, so this is the diagram of a multi-channel spectrometer based on a grating spectrograph with an array detector. So this is the spectrograph that you have there, the grating. So you have the source, it could be D2 or and W. Okay, so the radiation from the tungsten, so the deuterium source is made parallel and reduced in size by the length and the diagram. So that's the one that serves as your wavelength selector. Now the radiation transmitted by the sample enters the spectrograph to the slit. So yan yung slit na meron ka dyan. And then you have some mirrors that you have here, collimating mirrors, and then you have gratings that you have here. So it makes the beam parallel there. Okay. And the grating disperses the radiation into its component, which are then focused to a focusing mirror that will lead to the photodiode array or CCD array. And then it will be processed by the computer system. So this is the so-called diode arrays that you have. So this is available in the market. Okay. Sometimes they combine it with the fiber optics. And that's the one that I think I have an instrument that I bought for $1,000. Yung dadalhin ko has absorbance and fluorescence at the same time. So yan yung tinatawag natin multi-channel instruments. So if we're going to look some of the specific things, so ito yung Spectronic 20. So it's a digital readout. Okay. So if you're going to look at the schematic diagram that we have here, so usually it's a tungsten lamp. Okay. So you use it for visible region. So there's a field lens there and there's a slit. So you select what wavelength you want the tungsten lamp to have. Pass to the objective lens, the gratings, the wavelength, the light control, then exit slit, go to the sample, and then the filter, and then you have a detector that you have. So if you're going to, that's where you put the cuvette. No, not the cuvette, but the test tube. And then there's a wavelength selector, 100%. Once you put the blank, you select, you adjust the knob here until you get 100%. Okay, if you want to use 0% transmitter, you adjust this knob. Now, for me, I think even if it's old, that should still be part of the experiment. I still have one experiment of this in the CAM32 version that we have. Now, if you have a typical manual double beam spectrophotometer for a UV visible region, so this is what you have, the light sources, and then it passes through, okay, a slit, there's a concave grating there, okay, then pass to another slit. So there's a mirror that will split the light to give you to go to the reference and the sample, and then it will be going at the same time to the detector, which is a photomultiplier. Now, if you have this Barian Tari, that's one of the instrument that we have in the lab. So this is how it looks like. The principle is still the same. I remember before we used to open the instrument so the students can see the part, but we need to close it. Why? Here in the US, we can leave the instrument open forever, but there in the Philippines, we need to close it. Why? What's the difference? Bakit kailangan sarhan agad dyan? Dito pwede namin iwan. We get them with open everything. What do you think is the reason? Oo nga, no? Ba't ang alikabok yan? The dust. Yes. It's the dust. Aside from that, ano pa sa tingin nyo? Yeah, moisture, humidity. Masyadong humid yan. Even, even my meditation sometimes, when I was there, bakit parang mamasa-masa itong lalagyan ng gamot ko? Okay? So this is one of the main company that sell that. So we get a new one, okay? And it's much faster. So mga student kasi, pag nagamit nila yung dalawa, ang gusto nila yung mas bago kasi mas mabilis. Sinitsapwera na yung luma dati na meron pang tinatawag namin 3D printed ng save icon because we use the plastic disc. And if you're going to look at multi-channel diode array detector, this is how it looks like. So you have a tungsten lamp and a deuterium lamp, and then it passes through the source lens, okay? And then you have a shutter or a spray light filter, so it passes through the sample or the cuvette. There's a source lens before pass to the slit going to the grating and photodiode array. And to tell you frankly, between UVBs and we could say chromatography, this is more useful as long as their sample is, we could say, no need for separation. But if you need to separate, you can still use a detector that contains a UVB. That's what we do. Like my students screening the caffeine or determining the caffeine that in different Red Bull samples. So question. If the next one is maybe next meeting applications of the smaller absorption spectrometry. So what you need to know now is at least ano ba yung nakikita niyo sa UVB? And I think that's one of the things that is very useful there. Ano yung mga UVB instrument natin dyan? Spectroscopic instrument. Anyone? Siguro meron tayong ilang UVB spectrometer meron tayo or spectrophotometer. Sino dito nagtuturo ng analytical? Dalawa sa AECD. Ano yun? Double beam? Buhay pa ba yung lumang double beam? Tsaka single beam? May bago. May IR ba? May Spectronic 20 pa or ginawa ng museum? May IR ba? Because I think what Ma'am Ami told me before, merong atang IR. Naka-study leave daw. Kalimutan ko yung pangalan. Marquez ba yun? Hindi ko alam yung pangalan na minention. Meron daw tapos nasira ata. I remember when I was graduating, we have an IR bago. Tapos dalawa pa yung aircon. Halininan yung paggamit ng aircon. Kaso na misalign din eh. So I have to go to FTRDI to get the IR sa thesis ko. So walang IR. Wala tayong IR dyan. How about yung spectropolarimeter? Because this is the one that I promised to bring. So I have a very small one. We don't have a portable IR. So the one that I might bring will be the portable spectropolarimeter and Raman spectrometer. So during that time, if you're there in UP, you are welcome to see how it works or use it. Let's just find some sample where we can use it to analyze. Okay. And then meron kayong walang CCD, no? Because during that time, the only CCD that we have is in UP Diliman, but I don't know if they have it in Manila. And then XRF, wala sa P6. With the Raman, I know someone in UP Manila has it. And I think in physics, they have a Raman spectrometer with Alvin. I forgot the last name. Okay. No, we just get an XRF. Okay. It's an X-ray fluorimeter. We have an old XRD that we want to dispose because the chair and I are just, I think it's older than both of us. And I mean, I dispose this summer. One, the Beckman BU spectrometer, yung may icon na floppy disk, it was top of the more yun yung pinaka-advanced when I was in undergrad, and you cannot use it unless, you know. And then we were going to dispose, I think, two IR. Okay. One of them is already, whatever I do, it won't work. And then the one that says IR, because I asked the chair, we have an IR on the other room. Is it working? Because this IR is giving me a laser overload. And whatever I do, I cannot fix it. That's where I got all the readings for the product. That's why I said, I need this one. Because what happened now is we cannot use it for solid samples. We're using the ATR one. But if our sample is like a liquid, like honey, and spray liquid propolis, we can do the reading. But if it's solid, it doesn't know. So that's why I don't know what happened. Maybe some of my students messed it up during the instrumental. Okay. So I think those are the materials that we have there. Do you have NMR or you still have to go to CPAC? How I wish we're like LaSalle. LaSalle has all the instruments. Now, the problem with our instrument is, uso po ba brown out dyan? Yung totoo. Nagba-brown out pa rin dyan. I'll take it off the record now.